Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 317. Today, Amanda, me, and Mike yap all things woodworking. Mike goes full Pekovich more than once. It's always a great thing. Before we get started, as always, I have a couple of announcements. First, and most importantly, we're going to try something new over at finewoodworking.com for finewoodworking.com members. On June 11th, it's a Tuesday night, at 7 p.m. Eastern, Dan Faya and I are going to be doing a question and answer. So you can send questions in for Dan in advance, or if you're an unlimited member, you can join in on the Zoom call and ask him whatever you want real time. If you're an unlimited member, the Friday beforehand, you'll get an email with a link to register for the Zoom call, and just do that and we'll see you there June 11th at 7 p.m. A couple of other announcements. Don't forget, if you want to check out the woodworking tour of England with Phil Huber and Anissa Kopsalis, check it out in the links below. And also, Michael Collins' surface carving e-learning class is getting started again. So head on over to finewoodworking.com/e-learning to get more information on that. It's a great class, and Michael's a great instructor, and the technique is wonderful. So check it out. All right, let's get started. So Amanda, did you want to read questions?
Yeah, I'll read questions. We have quite a few of them, so we'll go ahead and get started. But this question comes from Adam, hobbyist here who is restoring an old home and wants to make trim to match some of the existing trim in my house. I haven't found any trim profiles to buy that match. Thinking about making my own trim. I haven't found a router bit that matches the profile. How easily and expensive are these to get made? I have a large router. I don't have a shaper or a molding machine. What are your thoughts on trying to get a bit made? Other options I should consider? And I've seen a blade for a table saw that you attach knives to. Has anybody done this?
You've done that, Mike.
Yeah. Actually, I was just up in Port Townsend, Washington, where a friend of mine moved up there recently and bought a kind of a Victorian house built in the 1890s. And he had, again, some existing trim that he wanted to match. He went to the local kind of lumber milling company, gave them a sample piece of the molding he wanted. They cut the knives for it. They ran the stock for it. So that is one way to go.
That's a not inexpensive way of going.
I think basically the more you have made, the cheaper
Yes.
it is per foot. You know, I think once you recoup the cost of having the cutters made. Also, basically, he was saying that in the town he lived in was fairly small, so it was like kind of like the same builders made a ton of the houses in the area back in the day, so that a lot of them had very consistent molding profiles. So, it could be a situation where if you're in the same thing, maybe a local mill shop may already have cutters that are close. Yeah, I think it depends on the cutter. A lot of times more complex or larger moldings can be made by using a combination of router bits to create the larger profile, or either whether running the same piece through multiple bits or stacking it. So, you do a bullnose on one piece, tack it in place. You have another layer that might have a cove, tack it in place, and another with a bead. We did an article on that, running big moldings, and it was the same situation where you were building up larger moldings a piece at a time, creating that profile. Because I think most profiles, they're super simple. Unless it's like a really big cove, maybe that's something you want to do on the table saw. But if it's just a matter of kind of, hollows and roundovers, maybe there's a situation where you can tackle it piece by piece. And sorry, Ben, I don't know the author on that. It was a little ways ago.
We'll find it later.
Okay. Yeah.
Our house in Nashville had like a very unique trim, and I really loved it because I had never seen it before. And so I took a piece of it to all of the millwork places around, and they're all like, well, I've never seen that before. Like, okay, great. I think the quote, this was probably 15 plus years ago, the quote to get knives made was, I think, $300 or $400 to get the knife made. So that was like, at zero, you're already at $400, which for me was like way out of my budget.
Right.
So I got a little bit, and it was one room that we needed. So I needed like 2 windows and 2 doors or something like that. I didn't need that much. Had I needed a whole mess of it, of course it would make more sense. But it really was one of those where like I sat down and tried to break it apart and like think, okay, if I run this V-bit, if I run this cut on the table saw, if I run this cut on the router table, if I do this, and I probably spent a day or two figuring, like, reverse engineering it. And then I made a custom sanding block out of Bondo, which Amanda recently did a Made You Look post on custom sanding blocks. And one of them was basically the same technique that I used, where I think I sprayed a piece of the original trim with WD-40 or something like that as a release agent and built up a box around it and then squished Bondo in there. And it created the negative of the trim. And I was basically able to get close enough with the table saw, router table, and, you know, a planer or whatever to then just bring it the final bit home with the custom sanding block. But so if you've got just a little bit, it's worth the effort, I think.
Yeah.
That's a really smart approach. I mentioned this to you earlier, Ben, but my thoughts on it were, what I actually, first thing that came to mind was, I mean, he if he doesn't have a shaper, it's going to be hard to run trim. So building up those different shapes. But Matt Bixford did this really good demonstration at Fine Woodworking New England with molding planes. And the thing I found most interesting about that was how to break up the geometry and like how he approached reaching the final shape. Mm-hmm. So even if you weren't to go necessarily use molding planes to get to the final shape you needed, the geometry and the approach he took could be broken down to even router bits and, you know, table saw to get close to the geometry you needed. But yeah, Phil bought a custom router bit several years ago, and you are looking at several $100s to get a custom bit.
It was a custom router bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever known anyone to get an actual custom router bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it is pretty expensive, but yeah, that's my thought on it.
That's a great idea, because you think that, I need like a million different molding planes to get all these profiles, but he was just basically using like a hollow and a round and then laying everything out with a series of rabbets to create that profile. Of course, his molding planes are probably more than getting a shaper cutter made.
Yeah, but then you've got Bickford molding planes.
Then you do. So if you're looking, yeah. What do you do with a custom molding cutter once you're done? Probably nothing. What do you do with a pair of molding planes? Mm-hmm. Anything. Put it in your tool chest. Yeah, I like that idea. Okay, so now we're finally on the right track.
Yeah. Mike having an excuse to buy tools. Have y'all seen, just like this week, I think, Matt is selling basically profile gauges. They're like laser cut plywood or something. That's a profile gauge of his planes. And so I know we're wandering off into like a weird territory here, but that would be really nice to have to duplicate, to even say, it's a 3/8 inch round over or something like that. It's a blah, blah, blah. This is the router bit I need to go get, because, and I know you can 3D, here I go again, but I know you can 3D print profile gauges and contour gauges. And so part of the hard thing about dissecting a piece of trim is saying, okay, it's a round over, but how much of a round over is it?
Right.
What bit do I need to go buy? Because if you need a cove bit, you have to have the round over bit to measure the cove with sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought
And
those are
then-
super smart. Yeah.
And then the bearing's in the way, and then so there's like all of these difficult to figure out elements to break down. So if you got like the profile gauges from Matt or 3D printed some or something like that, that would make it a lot easier to figure out what the specific elements of your molding are.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm sorry, man. Like in the original question, was he living in a house with period trim that he was trying to match for the house?
Old home, he says.
Old home. Okay, so it's right. Yeah, get close, put some paint on it, call it good. You're the only one who's going to notice. If you want to go that option, that's valid as well. I kind of have gone that route in my house as well, a couple of different places.
What was the process? Do you remember what the process like was for getting a router bit made up? Do you just send them a drawing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a few companies that do it. I can't remember specifically which one, but I can ask and we could put it in the notes. But there are a few companies that do that.
Huh. I always just think like with carbide, it's like everything needs, because I know with molding cutters, it's basically there's a person there who's good at using a grinder who just has to cut one knife close enough to your profile, right? But I would think with like a carbide router bit or something like that, it ups the ante in difficulty.
Yeah, I don't know.
Osborne Wood Products is celebrating 45 years serving hobbyists, cabinet makers, furniture makers, and builders. With industry-leading wood species availability and same-day shipping available for most orders, you're sure to find the product you need in their catalog of unfinished table legs, kitchen island posts, corbels, moldings, and more. Known for excellence, quality, and courtesy, Osborne is committed to partnering for your success. No minimum order quantities and quantity discounts available. To receive 10% off your next order, use code STLK624 before July 5th.
Do we want to jump into the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. This one's from Nathaniel. Having recently used a router table for the first time, I began to imagine some brilliant possibilities for making joinery that I haven't seen covered on the usual sources, YouTube, Google, etc. I'm beginning to fear the reason for this is that the methods are perhaps unsafe. Before I risk digits finding out for myself, I thought I'd throw the questions over to you guys. First one is it possible to make a tenoning jig for the router table that is similar to one you might make for the table saw? For example, one on which you could clamp pieces vertically and ride along the fence for reference. In my particular instance, I would like to make a sliding dovetail, and the protruding part would have to ride vertically along the fence. And then the second question is it possible to make some kind of miter fence, crosscut fence using T-track or otherwise to make tenons faster and cleaner than you might make on a table saw? So I've never done tenoning on the router table personally.
I feel like this one could go one of two ways.
I've done tenoning at the router table, and we've done a couple articles on it. I think John White's Amazing Router Table in issue 153, the inaugural Tools and Shops issue, illustrated by Bruce Morser, had a attachment, basically a pivoting plate bolted to the back of the router table that pivoted up, and then a router can be mounted on the back. So basically it helps to have a means to orient the router in a horizontal fashion. And then you're running the workpiece flat on the surface of the router table, cutting either above or below that bit. And the thing that makes this really cool. So yeah, you can do a tenon really easily and accurately with the router table with the router mounted horizontally. Here's where it gets really cool is I think Brian Boggs did an article on where he needed to do an angled tenon. And so he either did this or I saw it and I created an angled sled to put the workpiece on so that you can cut an angled tenon using a horizontal router with a straight bit. And there was a sled. So you put the sled had a kind of a cheater base to it. So without it, it would route the top portion of the tenon. Then you'd put the cheater underneath it and it would route the bottom portion of the tenon. So you end up with an angled tenon with shoulders 90 degrees to the angled tenon, which, yeah, you can do on the table saw. But if you're having to make separate shoulder cuts at the same angles the cheat cuts, it becomes very difficult.
So are you changing direction?
Yes, you have to change direction. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Cause I think that's like the overarching like worry in this question
Always.
For me is like, are we aware of the router bit direction in relation to the fence and in relation to the workpiece right now? Because like when I think of a tenon jig that rides on the fence, it's like, oh, okay, that could work, but then it could go really south really quickly if you don't keep direction in mind. So so you've got a cheater piece that raises the piece up so it goes across the top of the bit.
Yes.
So you're going the opposite direction on a router table that you would normally go, right?
Yes, you are. Yeah, correct.
And then you drop it down without the cheater piece and you're working off the bottom of the bit. When the router is horizontal, I'm losing.
It's everything that a Panther router or multi-router does.
Oh, there you go. There's
just in an analog way.
Okay.
So buy a Panther router and then talk to Amanda. She'll help you figure out how to use it. Yeah, same thing. So you basically turn it into a horizontal router. The question, and then getting, if you do have something like a multi-router, Panther router, yes, you can do tons of tenoning and mortising. Of course, you can't mortise on a table saw. You can do that work really quickly and easily without the table saw. But I think if you have a regular router table and you're trying to do stuff on that, a lot of times, you can get it to do stuff. Is it easy as a table saw? Not necessarily. I've cut dovetails with the router table and just sort of an L backing fence. I've sliding dovetails on the router table is perfect. I think that's great. Usually it's a combination of a handheld router with the dovetail pit to cut the slot, and then you've got the bit and the router table with the workpiece going vertically to do the key part.
And the bit's buried in the fence.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
But to the bigger question, you just got a router table and you're starting to see some possibilities. Yeah. It's like you put a router in a router table and it just turns it into a completely different machine. And yes, the possibilities are endless what you can do with it. It kind of makes me think about the Shaper Origin in that when I first saw it and I've seen it, it's sort of like, okay, we invented this really, really cool thing. We need people to tell us what to do with it. In the same way you just invented a fixed base router, and it's just like, but then the things you can do with it beyond that are just insane. So, a lot of cool stuff. We've done tons of articles on it. Was it Pat Warner wrote a router book article for Taunton Press. Gary Rogowski did a router book as well. A lot of good stuff out there. There was even a magazine, I think called Router Magazine, that just was about doing every single thing you can think of, but using a router. Then it starts to get ridiculous because then it's just like, how can I figure out how to do this task on a router, it's like, yeah, you can, but that's probably a different tool altogether. But I don't know.
So, Amanda, out of everyone here, you have the most experience with a panel router, obviously, and a shaper origin, because I assembled a panel router, and then you haven't shown me how to use it yet. Do you need to, we're wandering off topic, but do you need to worry about direction as much with a panel router as you would with a router fence, or with a router table? Because you get the direction wrong on a router table, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're thrown. I mean, you have to have, you still have to have the understanding of what direction the bit's running, because it can catch and like be sure you're taking light passes. But I actually, my first approach to any tenon is a climb cut, because it creates this nice clean shoulder, but you just have to really have like a good grip on the tool and understand that you're making a climb cut.
On a panel router. On a panel router.
On a panel router, yes, specifically. But I think it goes to what Mike's saying and what you're saying about having a like foundational understanding of how a router works is important, no matter whether it's on a router table, panel router, even the origin. You know, there's a lot more, it's a bit more hands off with the shaper origin, but you still need to understand how a router bit's cutting and their direction and everything. So you can climb cut on a pan router, but you have to be aware that you're climb cutting. So
here's my pan router question that does relate to Nathaniel's question. If you're doing a 2-inch tenon, right? Do you nibble away the depth at it, or do you go full depth and nibble away the width, if that makes sense? Because I've always wondered about the deflection of a router bit at that length. Like a long router bit, I feel like is more likely to deflect being pushed laterally as opposed to nibbling away at it. Is that a concern for you at the panel router, which would also translate to on the router table like this?
So that was my thought here is a panel router, I go full depth and chip away. Sorry, my cat is in the screen. I go full depth and chip away at the width. And then the final, again, I'm doing a climb cut, a very light cut to begin with. And then the final pass is a conventional cut, which creates like a consistent tenon. If you're doing like multiple parts and stuff. That was my thought with the router table approach. If it's not mounted horizontally, you're having to like slowly raise the bit, right? Or slowly
move the fence in.
So I don't think making tenons on the router table, a traditional router table, would necessarily be any faster than the table saw. But
I think I would be more apt to use a shorter pattern bit and have the to do a tenon and have the workpiece lying down on the table.
Mm-hmm.
That's and like you would a dado stack on a table saw. So, but there's so many different ways of doing it.
Yeah, there's a million ways to do it.
So, Amanda, I'm going to put you on the spot, and you can decline to answer this question. We'll just cut out this whole section, just because I know that you're familiar with both the Shaper Origin and the Panta router, and I'm sure you get asked this question a lot: is which one is better? And in the past, you've said, well, you really can't compare; they're two different things. So I'll let you off the hook there. However, let's say you're starting out a shop, you have neither one of these things. Is there one that you would get first, depending on the type of work you're doing, over the other? And would you eventually want both, or are they two different systems and you kind of commit to one over the other?
So the way I always answer this question is it goes back to what kind of work you're doing. if I were to do like a production run, say I were to want to do a small line of furniture and I'm repeating processes, I would lean towards the panel router. But if I were doing custom one-off pieces, the shaper origin opens up a lot more possibility. So it goes back to what kind of work you're doing. But the panel router is a production machine, and if I have to make that decision a lot of times where I have the best of both worlds, where I can make custom templates on the panel router with the origin.
Oh,
so that also opens
cheating.
up a lot more. Yeah, it's not even fair. I know. But if I were to start out and I were doing what I prefer to do is like a design furniture around production level, I'd probably opt for the panel router first.
Okay.
And then if I didn't know or didn't want to necessarily go that direction, I wanted to be able to do, because you can do any type of joinery on the origin, it's not as quick, but it's opens up just a million options. I would opt for that. So
well played.
I hope
Good
that answered the question.
I think it did. Yes.
The online mastery program at the Northwest Woodworking Studio begins its 6th season this October. What a remarkable change has occurred in the world and in the way one can teach design and woodworking skills. For over 20 years, our mastery students have designed and built great furniture. Now the OMP trains folks from across the country in design and building techniques. This is a 2-year immersion program that takes on all levels but true beginners. Anyone with the desire to deepen their understanding of the craft and commit to building great pieces is welcome. The requirement is to work out of your own shop with your tools and a good internet connection, along with a camera so you can join our class each week on Zoom. We meet weekly for 3 terms each year with lectures, videos, and discussions covering design topics that range from the 14th century to Morton Esherick and George Nakashima. Hand and power tool use, drawer and case construction, hand-cut dovetails, coopering, coving, chair design. There is a whole slew of topics we cover. Invest in yourself. Invest in your education. Please go to our website, northwestwoodworking.com, for more information. All spelled out, northwestwoodworking.com. Thank you.
Yeah, it's tricky. I get asked that a lot, though. Like, I think one of the few people I know that has both and uses both a lot. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that makes it a huge asset because most people, the vast majority of people, have no experience with either one. So the fact that you can answer just that question intelligently and knowledgeably is really cool.
Well, and you've worked with both of them in a production environment too.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And even then, like, I mean, in some ways I would pick the origin because you could use it to make whatever jig you need. It's helpful for making jigs, but it goes back to the same thing. It's like really having an understanding of what the tool is. Then it opens up all the options you have. Like having a foundation, like an understanding of the pan router. Then you can, I can make custom templates for this, and this is all the options I have. It's a tricky question, but yeah. I'm glad it sounded diplomatic.
No, and it really speaks to the essential nature that they're not automatic. They actually are just more like force multipliers in terms of if you have a mind for creative problem solving, you can come up with a lot of cool solutions that these tools can handle, but it's really involves as much creativity as any other aspect of woodworking. That whole thing about machines are mindless and automatic, where hand tools, you need skills. It's like, no, I think you need tons of ingenuity and creativity to make a table saw do whatever you want it to do, or router or any other tool. And just the fact that the tool is more powerful just means that you can leverage that power to do smarter and cooler things faster.
This is starting to, so I'm going to slowly sneak this back into the episode because what y'all were just saying was really good. To bring CNC into the equation too, though, like this weekend I was working on a design And if you only use your existing knowledge base, none of these tools are the answer. Like if you only use the knowledge base of, I have a table saw, this is how we do my joinery. I have a hand saw, this is how I do my joinery, whatever. None of these tools are the answer. But like as I was doing my design, I was sitting there, I was like, oh wait, do I want to bring this piece to the CNC? And if I do, then I can design it this way. And if I don't want to go through the setup, or if I don't have the bed size, if I don't have this, now I need to design it this way. And all of a sudden I realized it was like, okay, this piece I'm going to CNC, this piece I'm not. This piece I'm going to 3D print, this piece is going to, or whatever. And when you have a full understanding of all of the different tools, it changes the way you think. And all of a sudden, the argument of like, oh, well, I wouldn't do that because, but it's like, of course you wouldn't use that tool because you don't have like the full knowledge of that tool to incorporate it into your shop, your flow, you know? If you don't have a table saw, dados on a table saw doesn't make sense. You know, if you don't have a CNC, designing an element with like a curved rabbet that does this other thing is just kind of stupid. Right. So, I think that Amanda, what you're saying is like having the full grasp of all of these tools is, and you're never going to know until you have the tool how you're going to fully use it 4 years from now. Right.
Right. But I do think, I was thinking of this the other day, and kind of what I was alluding to with saying, like, if I were to make production style furniture and I had to buy one tool and it was the panel router, I'm understanding the limitations of that too is a good thing. Or I'm grateful that when I started out woodworking, I only had access to a certain amount of tooling, because then that pushes the creativity and it pushes the ingenuity, because you're like, well, how can I do that with this? And that there's a lot to be learned in that too. So I think it's, when I talk to people too, it's like, you're not necessarily, you can't, again, there's a million ways to do things. And sometimes the learning that comes from having a limited amount of tooling to approach something can be beneficial in your woodworking practice in general.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I try to boil it down to the issue of efficiency. And I explain to students and people that efficiency doesn't mean the fastest way to do something. It means the fastest way to get to the result you want without you altering that result in order to make it easier to use one tool or the other. So, and then that is based on, what machines or tools you have at your disposal, because the most efficient way to cut a tenon by hand is different than panel router, shaper, or table saw. So it's kind of whatever you've got. You need to work with what you have. And I agree, Amanda, sort of limiting your kind of your tool set to begin with helps you learn to be much more creative in that problem solving. And then the fourth thing I introduce is this notion of very few of us are woodworking at that production level, at professionally to make a living. So then the question is, what is our relationship to the material as this thing is being produced? Is there a computer between me and the material? Is there a router bit between me and the material, a saw blade or a hand plane or a hand saw between me and the material? And what is the essential experience we're after as woodworkers in the shop doing something which is fairly voluntary? Like, we don't need to be making a piece of furniture. But we are choosing to do it. And why are we choosing to do it? Is it to make a lot of things you want to make from a design standpoint or quantity standpoint? Or is it just in the shop making sawdust and plane shavings? And that answer is different for everybody. And I preface that because I'm always teaching sort of a mix between machine and handwork. And it's kind of saying for the people who are super focused on just handwork, it's like, look, no, this is like, you can go whatever path you want. And the reason the reason you're in the shop has a lot to do with the tools you're using once you're there. And then the tools you have sort of shape how you work beyond there. So it's this weird symbiosis between you buy tools in order to do things, but once you own those tools, they affect how you work and really, in a sense, what you make, how you think about making. So it's this weird correlation. I think that's why people love their table saws and bandsaws, and that's why people love their hand planes and hand saws and chisels, because they create that intimate connection between kind of what we're making, how we're making it, our experience of making. So if you say, shape or origin, that just doesn't feel like woodworking to me. I get that. But at the same time, and I've watched you do super creative things on the shape or origin. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I could do that. I need one of those. So I think it just depends how your mind works and what gets you excited and happy when you're making stuff out of wood. I don't think that's a single answer for anybody.
Sure. I love that too. And finding like a relationship between the tooling and deciding what steps that, I don't need to make a mortise and tenon by hand, but maybe I want to. So these other things speed up, get through different processes faster to where I have the time to do take time on hand tool work.
Yes.
So it's also that. It's like what machine is going to get you to the steps you like to do faster.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah.
And no matter which one you use, somebody on Instagram is going to tell you that they could do it faster with this other one.
Yes. And I'm glad for them. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like, as basically what you said, as long as you're enjoying your shop experience, as long as you're getting your mojo working, go for it. Who cares? If it's that's the important thing. Nobody needs to be, well, some people need to be doing this, but very few of us need to be doing it. So I'm going to read the next question, Amanda. This one's from Joshua. I'm reading this because I want Amanda's take on it first. I'm currently gearing up to build my 4th bench. I'm a glutton for punishment. And I'm curious to know when Mike is going to build another one. I know the FWW crew seems to be in opposition of the leg vise, but recently Mike hinted at liking the bench-crafted hardware and possibly making a modified leg chop. I would love to hear more on this topic. I don't think Amanda has waded into the leg vice swamp that we have set out in episodes past.
Yeah. I don't know that I have a strong opinion on it. I have used a leg vise like once. Would I go out of my way to add one to my bench? Probably not.
What do you have on your bench?
I just have one vise, and I would love to have a tail vise, but that's down the road.
Are you a tail vise user?
I love using a tail vise.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I just really haven't used a leg vise, honestly. So I don't have a strong opinion on this.
If you were building a bench from scratch, what would you have? Tail vise?
Tail vise. If in dream situation would be the H&T Gordon Pattern Maker's vise.
Yeah.
But that's just extra. Yeah. Extra stuff. But I do like their tail vise too. And I think I'd be content. And it's also what I'm used to. Like I was just talking about this the other day. Phil routed, have you seen those match fit dovetail clamps?
Mm-hmm.
Phil routed a dovetail channel across the front apron of the vise. That way you can attach just really long stuff with a regular vise and then the match fit clamp at the end of it, other end.
So it's not on the vise, it's on the bench.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was routed into the vise. I was like, there's a vise for your vise.
No.
Okay.
So on the front apron, you've got like a dovetail slot on the front.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess it's just like what I'm used to. So maybe when I have the option to start dreaming up a fancy bench, I'll have more of an opinion on it.
So, Mike.
I love the action of the bench crafted hardware and the leg vise. It's so smooth and it clamps. It clamps too well. And that, you know how like if you need to make some fine adjustments in a vise, you kind of tighten it to the point where it sticks, but you can still move it and then tighten it more. Super hard because it's just like, I'm just going to tighten it a little bit and it's like rock solid. So then you have to kind of learn how to use it a little bit. So the thing about the leg vise is it has a fairly narrow chop and it has a center screw. So I think it's like really, really good for holding stock horizontally, whether it's a panel or long beams or something like that on edge. I do a lot of dovetailing, so I'm looking to hold panels and wider boards vertically. And because I don't have a lot of clearance off to the side, it basically acts like a cast iron vise where the jaws are going to rack a little bit if you're pinching to one side or the other. So you still need to wedge that out. That's okay. I do that every day. I don't have a problem with it, but I add kind of an overly long outside jaw to my cast iron vise to give me a little bit more bearing side to side. And so I had thought about, well, if I get a leg vise, I want to see if I could just make like a wider chop to it or something. And then Tom McLaughlin, he was kind of premiering his new bench and he had the leg vise and he put like a horizontal chop at the top of it. And I've been meaning to ask him how he likes that because it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But that's also that mindset of, well, I have a cast iron vise. How do I make a leg vise act like it? And a lot of times the answer is you don't. It's a different thing. Learn and adapt your techniques to using this vise. Don't try to make it replace something you're comfortable with. However, it still looked pretty cool, and I do want to talk to him and see how he likes that, and if that's a good solution, because that's kind of cool. Because then you have the best of both worlds. You have this really nice smooth action. You have a little bit wider bearing surface. That's kind of neat. But then you start to get into the twin screw vices, and then whenever you're clamping stock between the screws, there's like zero racking at all. And even if you are clamping off to the side, because both of the screws are engaged with the chains, things still stay pretty parallel. So that said, like, well, how wide of a twin screw vise do I want? Because you can get it 12, 18, 24 inches between centers. It's like, oh, I want 24 inches between centers. Then the next thing you know, you've got like this 36-inch long vise jaw taking up half the front of your bench. And that can make working at your bench a little bit more cumbersome because you're always working around this thing out there. So then it's like, well, what if I don't want it out there all the time? Moxon vise. There's your twin screw vise. You don't need it. You clamp it on the bench when you need it. You put it off to the side when you don't. And then that makes good sense to have a leg vise, because if you have a means for doing wide panels vertically with the Moxon vise, pull it out when you need to, you get by with just a leg vise when you're not using that. So it's all connected. Lots of dominoes, and they all fall in different directions once you change one or the other. So, leg vises are cool. I think you're going to, kind of the adage is, if you have a leg vise, you probably have a Moxon vise too. And I don't mean that as a pejorative. It just means it's going to affect your work holding situation. You need a lot of solutions to tackle a lot of different problems. And now I have a cast iron vise with an elongated jaw, and I also have a Lee Nielsen Moxon vise because I was super curious, and I bought it, and it's really heavy, and I don't like pulling it out and putting it on my bench. But then after like 6 months of owning it, I actually pulled it out and used it. And it's really, really nice. It's like, oh, this is like super cool. And then I put it away and I haven't used it yet because it's super heavy. So I don't know.
So, but you're the only one that I can think of that you, for the majority of your woodworking in the past X number of years, you've had one style of, like, you've had a cast iron record vise or something, and that's it.
Yeah. So the thing is that all you need? It's like, no, I make do with it. Like Amanda said, this is what I have, and I know how to use it to do what I want to do. But I hate it when the advice given is that, well, this is what I have, so this is what you need, or this is what I have, or no, I don't own a router plane, so you don't need one either. You know, I don't like those answers because it's never the whole story. And and I get it. It's like, on one hand, it's like, you know, if you haven't really woodworked, you're just getting into things, and it's tough when you get kind of sucked into the notion of a specific vise or bench style, and it can create a stumbling block to doing the work you want to do because you have to spend 6 months making this thing without probably the proper skills or tools necessary to make it. And then that gets in the way of you doing the work you want to be doing. I think that's a super valid point of view. On the other hand, it's like, we all get into woodworking for weird reasons. And if the idea coming in is, I need that bench with that vise, go for it. That's fine. It's going to serve you well. Once you get it, you're going to figure out how to work, you know, with that system once you get it made. So
I think there's people doing incredible work on every single style of vise ever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, probably the most ambitious work, highly elevated work is being done. There's an inverse proportion to the quality of work someone is doing versus the expense of the tools they're using to make it with. I think probably some of the greatest woodworkers around probably don't have a complete set of Lee Nielsen vices in a handmade dovetail, you know, tool cabinet hanging on the wall with this and that. You know, it's like their shop is probably small, overcrowded, dumpy, and you'd be hard pressed to look around to find all the fancy tools that you think you need to do work that looks like that.
So one element that I just want to bring up before we move on to the lightning round. This is Joshua's fourth bench. So I'm wondering why he...
Oh, right, yeah.
If anyone should have this all figured out by now, Joshua, you should know what you want. Why are you building a bench if you're not ready, dude?
So
we should be asking you questions.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What were the other three like? What, you know, worked well? What didn't work well? What do you need to change? Is your work, the things you make, is that changing? Is the way you work, is that changing? And sometimes you just want a new bench.
There's that.
I'm kind of all over that too. I need a new bench.
You want to move on to the lightning round, Amanda? We
we can do lightning round. First lightning round question involves lighting. So any tips or suggestions on shop lighting? I'm planning a new shop space and looking for a good solution.
Ben, you can answer this.
Well, no. So, okay. So the lightning round's supposed to be for you, Mike, but like, you're the worst person to answer this question ever. Yes. I'm sorry. Your shop lighting is atrocious. And I think I've declared I'm not shooting in there again until you get new lighting. So, like a vice. Mike's done great work with horrible lighting. I can attest to that. I'm a huge fan of a lot of I've got spring clamps lights all over my shop, and now I've got them on arms that like swing around to all of the different areas of my bench. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 now, I think. And I'm okay admitting my eyes are getting old all of a sudden, and I'm using the magnifiers all the time and the light all the time right up on the teeny tiny things that I'm doing. And I don't think that any general lighting in my shop would ever replace the need for highly specific tunable lighting where I'm working at a given moment.
I would say both. Get as much general lighting as you can. So, okay, I have a very small shop and I have 9 fixtures, each containing 4 4-foot fluorescents. So when that was brand new and the ballasts work in all 9, that was firing. That was super bright. I've got 2 ballasts out right now, but I have 9 units, so I'm down to 7, and it's still pretty bright. And for some reason, even the ones that are on, they're not as bright as they used to be. Is that a tube thing? Is that a ballast thing?
Yeah.
And so the whole thing is people are kind of changing out their fixtures for LED lights. And I think I've heard you just take the ballast out altogether and run things directly, or you need to, I don't know what's involved with changing them out. I know it can be done, and it's sort of in the back of my mind to get that done. And then the task lighting is great. And then to have your bench by a north-facing window working in the daytime is super, super nice. But light's the key. Yeah. I have one of those. One of my students gave me, it's a little battery charged light. It looks like a little post, and then a little flap flips out, and it's like this LED light, but it has a magnetized base. And I find that I can stick that base to a card scraper on my workbench, and it becomes like a portable base I can move around so it's not tipping over as I'm cutting dovetails or something like that.
That's smart.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've used those like on a bandsaw. Those are really great.
Yeah, we just kind of stick them on the top.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Right on. Amanda, do you wanna chime in? Because
I think you guys covered it.
Right.
I mean, we have pretty good natural light, which is nice. But yeah, a task light, I've noticed I need that more now. I have on my scroll saw, I have like a ring light that has the magnifying lens in the middle.
Oh,
that's really nice. Yeah. I need to move that to my bench. But yeah, I think you guys covered it pretty well.
Okay.
I'll go to the next question. Offbeat skills to try between projects for people who usually do flat work. Steam bending, hot pipe bending, spoon carving, or green woodwork in general. So I didn't phrase this as a question, but I guess it's just what do you do in between projects? I personally...
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, every single one is a slippery slope. It's like every single one leads to a completely different path down woodworking. But I know, Ben, you've carved like a lot of spoons and stuff. That strikes me as a good complement to woodworking in the shop.
Yeah, it isn't a replacement, I don't think, for me. Although you become so in tuned with grain direction because of that I feel like it's elevated every aspect of my woodworking. So, but Mike, are you like, do you like, you do chip carving a lot or a good bit?
Yeah, no.
But yes, you've got like wonderful little pieces with like the chip carved row and like, is that something that you pick up because you want to put it in a piece, or is that a skill that you just decided to try?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a chip carver, like I'm not a turner or a carver. I'm a furniture maker that has to use those techniques. Okay. I was going to say a lot of those options on the list were things that are, I think, more interestingly applied to a piece of furniture or to work within a technique. So then I would just say plan a project around something you want to try. You know, I wanted to do some, steam, because I've done sawn curves on legs. I wanted to try steam bent legs. So I kind of did a case on stand that had steam bent legs, and that was super fun. Big learning experience. I invested in a little steamer. I invested in a compression strap. So it's those one-time expenses that kind of gave me an excuse to kind of get them, cut my teeth. I know what they're about. They live in my attic or hanging on my wall. And the next time I want to do it, I kind of know what to do. I really like that kind of thing. So, whereas like a spoon carving is separate. It's like, oh, I got my spoon blanks in the freezer or wherever you put them, and I can just pull them out when I feel like making a spoon or traveling. I don't know what, yeah. So I think it depends. If it's a technique you want to try, just design a project and stick it in there. If not, Amanda, do you, with all of your kind of Panda Router and Shaper Origin stuff, do you just like goofing around with stuff if you're not working on a big project?
I feel like I do a little in between projects, but it's more motivated by kind of what you're talking about, like a technique I want to apply to a larger piece in the future. Yeah. I bought a chip carving kit and I haven't touched it. Yeah. And I probably won't until I want to incorporate it in something. I just don't find myself like motivated by that. Like hot pipe bending is something I've been wanting to try, and Larissa's really great at it. Yeah. So I'm going to have her show me how to do that. But that's for a bigger project I have in mind. So yeah, I find that if I am doing something in between projects, it's like, how am I going to use this later on? Yeah. Yeah.
Mike, did you learn Kumiko that way though? Because I feel like that would be the one thing that it's like you might have made a few panels just for fun.
No, my first panel went in a piece of furniture.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
that's the only one that I could think of that it was like, no, I bet you he was just screwing around. Okay.
But it was a cabinet left over from a class. I didn't like the wood selection in the frame and panel door, so I remade the door with an opening at the top for a Kumiko panel. So it was that thing where I created the excuse to do it. Yeah, I think it's that thing where, and Amanda, I think you were sort of alluding to this a little bit. It's like I don't really have time to be goofing around with stuff that doesn't make it into something else, or at least I need a reason. Even if I make it up, I need a reason to be trying this out. And for me, a lot of times that means incorporating it into a piece of furniture. But that hot pipe bending, it'd be like, oh, you could batch out a bunch of salad tongs or the little clippy tong things for the kitchen with the hot pipe bending. I think I would kind of frame it that way. I don't like that notion of the wasted effort of practicing a dovetail joint or testing out a technique or practicing a technique before you do it. I think those are really, really good ideas, but I tend to not have the patience for those. So I guess along those lines, I have a number of sort of dovetailed, cornered, empty rectangles around left over from demos. And I think if you're practicing dovetails, don't do a corner, make 4 pieces and slowly dovetail each corner, and then you have a thing. And then once you have a thing, that offers an opportunity in between big projects to, what am I doing with this? Is it a wall cabinet? Is it vertically with the lid? Is it horizontally with a drawer or a door? What can I make of this? To me, I guess my playing has to do with those in between smaller projects as opposed to completely separated skill-based things. But I'd sure like to carve a spoon one of these days, but I don't know. I have such nice spoons from Ben, gave me a really nice spoon. A couple students gave me spoons, and they're so cool that I almost don't even want to go there. Like they're good.
The one I made was okay.
No, it's awesome.
Oh, that's right there.
Oh, there it is with the wrapped cord, with the wrapped end.
With the wrapped end. It's really nice. I use it. I put it in my little tea thing to pull my loose tea out into my teacup, and it lives right there.
Nobody's ever happy with the project that they made.
That.
There you go.
There's my tea.
That was in the office. That was for scooping out your office tea back when you were in the office.
Now it's my home office tea. Yeah, I love that stuff. So make spoons and give them to people because they'll really, really like them and appreciate them.
That is true. And the best part of making spoons and giving them to people is when you forget that you made them and gave them to them, and you're at their house and they pull out the spoon. They're like, I use this every day. You're like, I don't remember even making it.
Yeah.
But it means something to that person.
It does.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It does. Yeah. Because that's like every time I pick up the spoon, that's Ben.
Yeah.
Ben's spoon. Ben made me the spoon. So
some days he throws the spoon on the floor.
never. No. I always cherish the spoon.
Should we do one more lightning?
This one's from Chuck. If Mike is still using an iPad for designing furniture, I'd like to know what software he's using.
You were.
I don't. I don't really. I would say the short answer is I'm not designing on my iPad. I used it as a sketchbook for a while because I thought it'd be cool to have all of my sketches in a single place. My iPad is way too old to have like the super smart little iPencil stylus thing. I had the old one with like the rubber ball on the end, which was like drawing with a pencil tied to your thumb. So I found that cumbersome. I also found that the idea of keeping all of your drawings in one place digitally was cool, but I also found it to be really difficult to kind of sort through them. And what I realized is that a sketchbook it's a much better random access device to where I don't have to start at my newest page and scroll back page by page by page in order to get to what I want. I can look through super quickly, find what I want. It's this notion of things on pieces of paper which are bundled together. It's something that I think that we've taken for granted, but is actually a really good data access device. So I tend to do all of my sketching in tons of notebooks, and then I actually use Illustrator on my desktop computer to basically do full-size plan view drawings of everything I make, and I can do a lot of iterations on that in the same way that someone much smarter than me would use SketchUp, or a more powerful rendering program where you can change one leg and it changes everything else. You can change one dimension, it changes everything else. I do all of that manually just in Illustrator because it's a program I'm comfortable with and familiar with, but it's a basic drawing program. I've used SketchUp in a really crude fashion, but I just downloaded the new SketchUp on my computer and it doesn't work the way I wanted it to work.
The free one.
It's weird. I got to get back into it. And I think there was something glitchy on my computer, or I was thinking about downloading that to my iPad because I do have an iPad version for SketchUp. Unfortunately, my iPad is more for like watching marble races and disc golf tournaments on YouTube and posting Instagram posts, which I'm unfortunately not doing that often these days.
I know a lot of people use Procreate to draw on their iPad. That's what Peter Galbert uses. I've used it, and I'm going to stop pretending like I'm the guy who sits there and sketches stuff. I just don't do it. Nope. I tried to like do it daily for a year or whatever, and it just, I am no Pekovich.
Yeah. Peter gave me a super quick demo of Procreate when I was at a shop, and it was like really smart and it was really amazing, and I had sort of forgotten about it, but now that's something number one, I need a new iPad. My iPad is 7 years old. Yes, they still exist. Yes, they made them back then. And I definitely wanted like one of those little smart pencils and stuff. How do you do your designing, Amanda? Do you do that on the computer by hand?
I do an initial sketch and then go into SketchUp.
Okay.
But after moderating your design course, I'm rethinking how much I do by hand. Just because I leaned heavily on SketchUp for a while, but I think I've talked about this. It doesn't translate proportions quite right all the time. Like I feel like I've gone straight from SketchUp to milling. And then I'm like, this is way too, once I realize how the proportions are just off,
Yes.
So there's an advantage to drawing by hand and sketching things out.
Or at least have that intermediary step between something that's rendered and then going full size. For me, that's always kind of getting some super crude full-size mock-up just so I can look at it and say, oh, that's really big. I didn't know it was going to be that big.
Exactly, yes. There's some disconnect, but yeah. I did used to use Procreate for like designing marquetry, because you can just put an image and then kind of break up all the shading and stuff the way you need to, which I found Procreate was cool for that.
Okay.
But that's not really furniture.
Yeah, because you could use the layers.
Right.
That's what I'm going to do from now on. I've been using tracing paper for marquetry.
Huh.
And then I photocopy it like a billion times. I could just do it in Procreate. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the epiphany of this show is we're all going to jump on Procreate.
Yeah. I'm always shocked that you still have that same iPad though, Mike, because you use that iPad. You've written 2 books on that iPad.
Yes, actually 2 3/4. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, one of my keys is missing, and I don't know what character it is, but apparently I don't use it that often.
There's no ends in the new book.
Yes. Maybe it's like
how to cut a temum.
No semicolons. Maybe that's good. It's like less semicolons is more.
We'll leave that up to Liz to declare.
Yes. Maybe she's the one who got the butter knife and like popped that key out after editing my first 2 books. It's like, no, let's just, yeah.
That wraps another episode of Shop Talk Live. If you'd like your questions answered on one of our future episodes, please send a message to shoptalk@finewoodworking.com. If you'd like, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to also check out our Discord channel, where you can get a sneak peek of upcoming guests on Shop Talk Live and chat with other users about all things woodworking. See you next time.